I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Sandy Skees.
If you look at the impact you're creating and where it's creating friction in the world or friction in your business, that becomes a place for innovation. And that's what I love about purpose. And let me be clear, no one company can solve everything. Just like no single one of us can create a world that works for everyone, but we all have to do our individual part, just like brands do. So pick a piece of the problem you're going to work on, or a piece of the solution you're going to help contribute to, and let that be your primary purpose.
Sandy Skees is EVP, Global Purpose and Impact Lead at Porter Novelli, a leading communications consultancy part of the Omnicom Group. With over 3 decades of expertise in management consulting and strategic communications, Sandy has worked with clients including Visa, Abercrombie Fitch, eBay, and Panasonic, among many others. Author of Purposeful Brands, she is an experienced speaker on branding, messaging, and sustainability topics. She lives with her wife in Santa Cruz, California. My interview with Sandy Skees is coming right up. But first,
support for this and all the other podcasts on the Marketing Podcast Network is provided by Momento. Yes, you can use AI to make your job as a marketer easier. Momento is built to put the power of AI in your hands. It can write social media captions, have it watch or listen to a podcast and suggest, then automatically create social media posts to promote the show. Heck, it can even listen to a podcast episode, then write a poem about it you can use on your company blog. Go check it out. MPN listeners can try it for free at bit.ly/MomentoMPN. That's bit.ly/MomentoMPN. Hey there, it's Jason Falls. If your company or maybe one of your clients sells to marketers, you look for advertising channels that guarantee business marketers are paying attention, right? Let me introduce you to the Marketing Podcast Network. You're listening to it right now. It's a network of podcasts all about marketing. So 100% of MPN's audience are marketers. Reach them by advertising on the Marketing Podcast Network. Learn more and find our media kit at marketingpodcasts.net.
Sandy Skees, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks, Nick. It's good to be with you today.
I am excited to chat about your work and about brands with purpose. Now, I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we've almost done to purpose what we've done to concepts like story, and we've talked about it so much that we've almost run the risk of making it a bit generic. And we've got purpose, but what does purpose really mean to you, being the Purposeful Agency Pro of 2021?
I think, that's an astute observation, Nick, that we've rendered the topic generic, the term generic. I think you're right about that. It doesn't mean that it makes it any less meaningful or important because we've become bored with the word itself. The concept of purpose as a purposeful brand is the recognition that every business has a responsibility to the commons. And I like to call the commons those resources we all depend on, but none of us own: clean air, clean water, soil that's, rich and able to grow things, a functioning and cohesive society. Those are the things that are the commons. And all businesses, all brands have a responsibility to some part of that commons that they're going to take responsibility for. So the way I describe purpose is the greater good that a business will drive strategy around so that you create not only greater, broader impact, but also business value. When you get purpose right, when you're able to articulate how what you do as a business not only creates customer delight, but is also creating a better world, a better life, a better experience for species, mostly humans, but all. What you've been able to do is link your business and its reason for being to some greater purpose. And I don't think that will ever go out of style. In fact, I think as we, as humans, become more and more aware of the interconnectedness of everything, we're going to want to understand how our brands and our businesses, the brands we buy from, work for, or invest in, we want to understand how they're not just not harming the environment or not harming society, but what are they doing to actually make it better? And I think those are the brands that we're going to buy from, invest in, and work for.
So I'm always curious because I feel like sometimes we hear a lot of the same examples of companies, brands doing that. Who are some of your favorite ones that you love sharing what they're doing?
Well, you mentioned two companies that I've worked with, and I'm going to start with eBay because I think it's an interesting company, and we've done some work with them in their sustainability strategy work. But when eBay started, it was to find a way to sell a Pez dispenser, actually, if you'll believe that, and a broken pointer, electric laser pointer. And the recognition was, hey, there's these things that people have that they want to be able to get rid of or sell, and let's create a platform to do that. And in the earliest days and throughout most of the company's history, they understood themselves to be a place where they were creating entrepreneurs. You could, as a person, have a great side gig or a small business selling things on the eBay platform. And they had a lot of data that shows exactly how they were enabling and empowering and enriching individuals and small businesses on their platform. And I think that's an incredibly wonderful social benefit. That's a greater good from a social perspective. But what eBay wasn't taking credit for was the tremendous amount of goods they were keeping out of the landfill and keeping in circulation. And so what they've been able to do lately is quantify exactly from a carbon footprint perspective. Not only are they helping build an entrepreneurial class or a small business cohort, and they're keeping goods out of the landfill that would either be incinerated. So they're giving a second life to goods. And I just think that that notion of the greater good you create in the world and the cascading effects of that eBay's been able to harness. And so now they're actually a bit of a unicorn, I think, from a purpose perspective, because they have an extremely strong social purpose and they have an extremely strong environmental purpose. And that's rare for companies to be able to deliver on both those dimensions of the commons. And I think they're an interesting company to look at. And then the other is Abercrombie and Fitch, who we've worked with on their purpose. And if anybody has been around and bought or shopped in Abercrombie back in the aughts and the 90s, it was a very different brand than it is now. It was purposefully designed in that era to be an exclusive. We're keeping out everyone except the pretty people. And their CEO at the time was publicly saying these things. And when their new CEO, Fran Horowitz, came in about 8 years ago, it was a turnaround. And part of the turnaround included, who are we going to be as a company and what's going to be our purpose? And as we worked with there are 4 different brands, Abercrombie and Fitch, Abercrombie Kids, Hollister, and Gilly Hicks. What we recognized is all of them had a deep appreciation for and a passion for the power that fashion and culture, the sort of cultural zeitgeist has in creating a more inclusive world. And that has become their purpose. And so everything from gender exploration to size inclusivity to who's behind the cash register and in the regional and executive leadership, they've made a concerted effort to ensure that it includes everyone. And so I think there's a company that in a turnaround, and it's proven out that their stock is better. They're surviving in a tough time for an apparel brand. All of the omni-channel apparel brands, have struggled through COVID and beyond and finding their footing. And Abercrombie and Fitch has managed to come out smelling good. So, not to make a reference to the fierce cologne that was sprayed in all the shops, but Abercrombie's doing great.
Well, that's a great example too, because it really drives home that point you made earlier, that it's not just about, what are you doing? What impact are you having that's negative, but really about how are you enhancing and making the world a better place. And that's such a neat example because, those of us that do remember the Abercrombie brand when it was it did first emerge there, remember some of that as well. And that contrast is definitely something that you can see. As a brand is maybe thinking more about this, or with more intent about this, and looking at where they might be able to work in and have an impact of their own, where would one start with this?
I think we'll keep using eBay and Abercrombie as the examples, but I would say that the first place you start is looking at where your business, in the way it operates, is creating the most harm, because that's your greatest opportunity, right? So where there's harm created, there's the opportunity to create good, because that's the place where if you put attention on that, you're going to generate the biggest impact. And so that's why the Abercrombie example is such a great one, because they were exclusive. They were rejecting of certain kinds of people that didn't fit their customer profile. So that was where they were creating societal harm, if you will, which is the judging of types of people that weren't invited in. And so by flipping that and saying we're going to actually become one of the most inclusive brands and become a beacon for showing what real inclusivity looks like, and teach others, then that becomes the greatest impact. Another example, and there is still a work in progress, but if you look at Coca-Cola, that two of their great challenges are the nutritional aspect of the product itself, but also the form factor we buy it in, which are plastic bottles. And so, and the use of pulling water from watersheds all over the world to create it. And so those are the places where they're tackling those three things. And I would say, their work in trying to determine what's the form factor that we're going to deliver this product in? Does it have to be plastic bottles? And so I think those are the big challenges where, if you look at the impact you're creating and where it's creating friction in the world or friction in your business, that becomes a place for innovation. And that's what I love about purpose. If you get it right in terms of the commitment to the commons, and let me be clear, no one company can solve everything, just like no single one of us can create a world that works for everyone, but we all have to do our individual part, just like brands do. So pick a piece of the problem you're going to work on, or a piece of the solution you're going to help contribute to, and let that be your primary purpose. But once you get that right and you understand your role, then what you can do is it should unlock innovation. It should give you permission to look for ways in which you can contribute to solving that problem. Great example is in an ideation session we had at Abercrombie, and all of a sudden the discussion around inclusivity and helping people express who they are was, wonder why do we have clothes in like the men's side and the women's side? What if it's just by size and shape? And another great example is we were working with an eyewear company, and the first decision they made was, am I designing a frame for a man or a woman? And when they said, well, you know what, it actually doesn't matter, and we want people to be free to express themselves, so let's look at face shape. Or how are you going to use the glasses? Are you a sporty person and you're always banging on your glasses? Then you need a sturdy pair. And it was less about gender identity and more about the use model. And what they did by wanting to create eyewear that allowed people to express who they truly were, all of a sudden it created all this energy and innovation and new ways of looking at the market, at product development, and all of it. And that's when you're clear about your purpose, your primary purpose, then you should have an innovation unlock, a creativity unlock.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Steve Turney hosts a great podcast geared toward mental health marketers called The Boost. Steve, tell listeners what you cover on the show.
The Boost is our podcast, and the tagline is conversations with people promoting mental health. And that's what it is. So it's marketers, company executives, therapists, and mental health advocates talking about what they're doing to move this industry and this important thing called mental health forward.
Amazing. And where can people subscribe?
I'm big on LinkedIn, so you can find us there, just /Steve Turney, or you can find the show at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for The Boost wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Ian Truscott hosts a great podcast called Rockstar CMO. Ian, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
Well, Jason, I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from sysadmin to CMO, and each week I chat with the true rock stars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share what we call marketing street knowledge to inspire our listeners in a rockstar.
Amazing. Where can people subscribe?
Go to rockstarcmo.com, find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Rockstar CMO FM wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So this is such a big, can be a big lift thinking about all of this.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure I talk about that you distilled all of this into your book, Purposeful Brands. Talk about the shape and scope of that and who might be a good candidate for picking that up or giving it as a business-focused stocking stuffer this holiday season.
There you go. I wrote the book for, marketing, brand, communications, and sustainability professionals. But actually, any MBA or anyone who is aspires to a role in business, because I believe that the role that business plays, brands play in the world is shifting because the stakeholders expect more. And so if that's the case, then how do I take that truth and make it real in my work every day? Well, Purposeful Brands is a bit of a how-to, and there's some good case studies and inspiration in there. But what it says is, here's how you do a purpose exploration. And, many times you start, and this is true for, let me say, it isn't just big, huge multinationals like eBay and Visa and Abercrombie. It's for early stage companies, scale up companies, brand new initiatives, brand new brands. Because if you can build it from the very beginning, you can avoid all the pitfalls of having to go back and sort of reclaim your purpose. But somewhere in a founder's story is the impetus that the inventor or the entrepreneur had in creating that business and the sort of magic they expected this product or this service or this company to create in the world, and the delight it expected to create for customers. And in there, in that founder's story is an understanding of how they're going to make somebody's life better. So dig into that. There's a whole explanation of all the other things you look at. If you're at a bigger and more established business, there's a way of doing a scan of all the things you might already be doing as a business from an environmental and social good perspective that are just scattered throughout the business, and how you gather all those together and you look across them and you begin looking at patterns like, well, what are the things we're already doing that diminish our environmental impact or improve societal cohesion? What are things we're already doing from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective? All those things, because those are the places you look for hints at how to lift them up into a greater purpose. And once you do that, you articulate it, and then you begin operationalizing it through the business. And that's where the sustainability strategy comes in. Sustainability has always been, as a profession and as an industry sector, the dimensions of a business that are its environmental dimension, its social dimension, and its growth or revenue dimension. You have to be able to dial those three things constantly so that your chase for revenue and growth isn't negatively impacting society, meaning exploitation of workers, for example, or or the environment creating a preponderance of waste, right? So if you're always dialing those things so that one never gets out ahead of the other, that's what a sustainability strategy is. And it's in examining the environmental impacts you're having, the social impacts you're having, and the way in which it's driving revenue and growth. That's a sustainability strategy. And that's generally where you'll find your purpose becomes operationalized, becomes tangible and real in terms of goals and programs and things you can do. But they all ladder back to what greater good are we trying to create in the world? And that's all in the book. It gives you a way of framing it so that you can think it through for yourself, for your business, but also in dialogue with your executive team, your boss, your board, etc.
That is great, and I love the point that you kicked off with. That of course there's the specific audience, but really the role that brands have on the community, on the environment, are critical, and I love that framing as well. As we record this episode, and we are at the inflection point of the close of one year and the beginning of another. So for many, there are big ideas on deck, thinking about what we've done, what we'd like to do differently. As we analyze this potential fork in the road, how can we incorporate a purpose check-in for our brand strategy at the close of a year and the beginning of a new one?
Well, I think the first is an examination. A lot of times a purpose is sort of hidden in a company's mission statement, its mission and values, right? And I'm an advocate for explicitly stating your purpose because it's crystallizing. And it also helps a company think about which issues it might show up for, and respond to, that are going to be out in the zeitgeist as we head into a new year. So I think I would start with a sort of a purpose exploration, and I've done these with companies where we'll do let's talk about a personal purpose, and then let's talk about an organizational purpose, and let's look at where those two things come together. Because a lot of times when we start exploring, hey, what's our personal purpose, it leads us into, well, that's why I chose this company and this job and this work, because I feel, but we haven't articulated it. So I would say create space in the planning process for having a purpose conversation first. And then I would say that the second thing would be link that to not only where the business is going and what the brand stands for, what the brand will show up for in terms of issues. And in the book, I have a whole chapter on, look, brands are under pressure to show up around particular social issues. And how do you know? How do you know what to do? And so the frame that I like to use is one that says, you're not going to show up on every issue, because while many issues will have resonance with your employee base, and that's the most important stakeholder group, when it comes to all your other external stakeholders, there's a handful that are going to be most relevant and salient to your purpose and your business. And when you know what those are, then you make a decision. Am I showing up as an ally, an advocate, or an activist? Because those roles are very different, and you can't be the same on everything. And so there's a way of identifying it, and I talk about it in the book, where you can look at that and say, oh, this is an issue that we're going to be an ally on. We're going to stand alongside those who are working on this problem. But that's the most we're going to do is acknowledge this problem is here and be a good ally. But there might be another issue that's really important to the success of your business or your innovation pipeline or your product success. And that's where you're going to be an activist, and you're going to call others to help change that with you. So it's a spectrum of ways of showing up around issues. So I think as we're heading into this next year, particularly here in the US, where we have, an election year coming, and there's just going to be a lot of noise in the marketplace, centering yourself around who are we as a business and what's the greater good we're trying to create when you have that exploration first, it becomes a very strong place you can stand as a brand and respond to what's going to be happening in the marketplace.
That is great advice for people to take into planning for the new year. Sandy, our conversation has made me smile many times, and it is now my opportunity to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Yeah. Well, the one brand that has made me smile a lot in the last week has been Spotify, actually. I just love the year-end compilation of everyone's music and the way they're first of all, it surprised me, my list, my compilation, my a lot of Americana, Brandy Clark, a new emerging artist who's actually up for 6 Grammys, was my number one artist. And I love seeing other people's posts and getting a bit of an insight. And it's just a playful way for a brand to connect to people, both their lives, because music is such an expressive way of identifying, and it's timely, right? We're at this year end. And so I think it's a smart brand move, and it just has made me smile. So I've been enjoying it.
I love it. Great example. And hat tip to our previous guest, Jay Norman, head of music marketing over at Spotify. And we talked about the year in review earlier this year. And here it is, a one-of-a-kind brand touch point. Sandy, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Pretty simple, sandyskees.com, SANDYSKEES.com. There you'll find information about the book. I do speaking all over, advising, etc. So, feel free to look me up at sandyskees.com.
Awesome. And we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Sandy, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be with you.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.